All right, guys, we're back. Jiu Jitsu Motivation Podcast. I'm Greg Melita, black belt second degree, owner of Hampton's Jiu Jitsu.
And I am Brian DeLuca, black belt first degree and author of Jiu Jitsu for Small People and Other Weird Shit I Think About.
Love that title. All right, guys. So today we got Greg Anderson on. He owns Endless Endeavor podcast, and been meaning to get him on here for a while. And so really glad we're able to do that. Kicking off season 2 of our podcast. So welcome aboard, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you having me.
So yeah, I mean, we definitely seen you on social media and Instagram, and just seeing how you came out of nowhere, pretty much. I mean, I've never met you, obviously, but let's actually kick off with how I first saw you come onto the scene and go viral, pretty much, on social media. So let's actually start with that before we go into any of the other stuff, which is how did all that come about, leading up to it, and everything from there.
Yeah, bro. So, I mean, the video that got me all the notoriety and went viral was a video of me when I was a police officer sitting in my patrol car. The pandemic, this was May of 2020. So the pandemic was a couple months old. And, at the time, I didn't really want to take a political stance pandemic because everything was new. We didn't know how dangerous it was. We didn't know what was a scam and what was factual and all that stuff. But what I did know is, as a police officer, the things that I was seeing other police officers do was a violation of people's constitutional rights. And so when I was seeing people arrested for going to the park, people arrested for going surfing, people's businesses being forcefully shut down, I was like, whoa. Like, what the fuck is going on worldwide, really, but especially within our own nation, because we fall under the United States Constitution. And it was just really troubling. And I kept seeing it. You guys know how it was. Every time you check social media, every time you turn the fucking television on, some old lady's getting arrested for walking her dog and all these crazy things. But the craziest thing to me was the fact that there was law enforcement officers out there willing to follow those orders because a mayor or a governor is telling them to do so. And so, prior to being a police officer, I was in special operations for a decade. I did 14 combat tours to Iraq and Afghanistan. And I was seeing, the military sent us all over the planet to fight for people's freedoms. That's what we were told at the time as young 20-year-olds, Here I am, 40-year-old man now in my own country, seeing people's freedoms and liberties being trampled on. And I'm like, who the fuck? Why aren't people speaking up? My entire adult life has been about defending people's freedoms. And now I'm watching it happen in my own soil. And so I was just on patrol one day in Seattle, and I saw, again, I checked my social media or whatever, and there was 2 young Hispanic ladies that got arrested for doing nails out of their basement. And it was like a sting operation. A couple cops went in pretending to be customers. And then since they did their nails, they hooked them up and took them to jail. And I was like, I can't fucking take it anymore. The profession needs to be held accountable. People on the inside need to speak up, because I felt like if I'm sitting in a patrol car in uniform and I say, hey guys, this isn't what we do. I'm speaking to cops as a cop, right? So I thought it was important for somebody in the someone inside of the profession wearing the uniform to speak up. And that's what I did, man. And I just, it wasn't a rehearsed thing or it wasn't planned. I just reached that point. I was fed up. I needed to express my thoughts, held my phone in front of my face for 8 minutes and just articulated those things. Guys, this isn't our job. We don't have legal authority to do that. Even if regardless of where you stand on the pandemic, our oath is to the United States citizens, not to your governor, not to the mayors, and not to these weird political allegiances that were popping up all over the country. Which side are you on? I was like, we're not on a side. We're on the side of people's constitutional liberties. And bro, it went super fucking viral. I mean, hundreds of millions of views. And it's real bizarre how your life can change dramatically inside 24 hours, And it's funny because every single cop I know personally was like, that message needed to be said. It was powerful. Even my chain of command and my superiors were saying that. But then when I was told to take it down, and to this day, I don't know where that order came from, but the rumor mill has it that it came from the governor's office. And they said, we can't have a cop telling people not to obey the governor. I was like, well, I'm not taking the video down because everything I said, I stand behind. And they're like, well, if you don't take it down, we've been told that we're going to have to terminate you for insubordination. So I said, listen, you want to terminate a police officer for publicly stating that our duty is to support people's constitutional rights? Then maybe it's time for you to do that because I'm not in alignment with you guys anymore. And that's exactly what happened, dude. They fired me.
Wow.
But it was, it's weird, man, because at the time it was stressful and it's like, shit, I got 3 little kids. I'm on the same grind as everybody else, you know? But I was like, I can't compromise my integrity and bend a knee. And because pulling that video down and rescinding my words, what that would do is I'd lose credibility within my own circle, the people that know me.
Yeah.
And so I just said, you guys got to do what you got to do. And they ended up terminating me. And in hindsight, best fucking thing that ever happened, man.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like, you know, you made that video purely out of your, you know, your gut instinct, you know, on the job, boom, you know, this is how I'm feeling, knowing that risk that, hey, you know what, it may freaking come down to me being terminated, but that doesn't matter, you know?
Do you think that's what it, like so many people, you know, you mentioned like a lot of people weren't speaking up, right? And do you think so many people were just afraid of that, afraid of, you know, they built, you know, we all build these lives for ourselves and they were afraid that that would be taken away, like economically, if they spoke up?
100%. Yeah. And it's something that's really troubling to me is that I've seen so many first responders over the last 24 months. They're like, hey, I don't agree with it. And I think this is stupid, but, you know, and then they have their excuse. I got a mortgage. I got little kids. And it's like, listen, that's fine. We all have our priorities and the things that we need to take care of as men, but you can't do those things at the cost of compromising your morals and your integrities, because today it's arresting a lady for doing nails. What are they going to ask you to do tomorrow? It's up to us as the first line of defense to keep this government in check. And so many cops that I thought would stand behind me and be like, not a fucking chance. A lot of them just kind of went along, you know, go along to get along. And they're like, how many videos have you guys seen where officers are like, I don't agree with this, but it's my job. And it's like, dude, that it's sounding awful fucking 1930s Germany. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. Yeah. And, you know, at the beginning, a lot of people are like, dude, you're crazy. This isn't worth losing your job over. Well, look where we're at now. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think the proof is out there now that if we don't force these people to back the fuck off of us, they're never going to. And so after that video happened, I opened my Jiu Jitsu Academy in 2015. So it had been open the whole time that I was a police officer up here in Seattle, but it was more of a hobby because I didn't have the energy to be working full time and then nurture an academy full time like you need to. And bro, that my academy has grown by 500% in the last year and a half. And I always tell people, I don't say this to boast or like, oh, look at me, but financially, I'm making about 3 times the amount of money as I made as a police officer, as a jiu-jitsu professor. And the reason that I say that is because a lot of people are reluctant to take that step into the unknown. But as long as you're passionate about something and you're willing to put the work in, it's going to give back to you at some point. That's just how the universe works, man.
Well, I think that's a good point too, especially with, you know, people think they're going to open the doors of any business, right? And people are just going to walk in. They don't understand how much work goes into running a business. Like, they just don't. Whether, you know, even I'm sure there's a lot of people who have opened jiu-jitsu schools. They thought they were just going to teach jiu-jitsu. They didn't realize there's this whole other part of their business they need to worry about. Yeah.
You know, the craziest thing about opening an academy for me was every single person that heard about it, it's like, I can't wait till you open. I'll be there. And I was like doing the numbers and I'm like, man, if half the people that claim they're going to start jiu-jitsu actually sign up, we're going to be doing well right out of the gates. Bro, about 1% of the people that said they'd be there actually showed up, you know, and that was like, that hit me hard because it's like, man, talk is cheap, but when you get your mats up and the doors are open, man, like you said, people didn't start trickling in for months and months. And it was a very, very slow process. And I I do think growth becomes exponential as long as you're putting out a good product, because the more people that are there, the more eyes are on it, the more they're talking about it. And so now we're hitting that point where growth is becoming exponential, but it was a long path, man.
Yeah. I think a lot of times too, people don't necessarily believe in what they started, right? You got to believe if, from beginning to end, like this is going to be successful. I'm going to make this work. Cause then you figure it out, you figure it out along the way, because things are always changing.
Yeah. And and I won't lie, man, like I had a little bit of imposter syndrome because I got my black belt out of Los Angeles with Checkmat. And the guys on my team were like Marcus Buchecha and Joe Alassies and Luis Ponza and Lucas Leite and like Marcelo Mafra. And when I slapped and bumped with these guys, they took my soul every single time. And that has not changed to this day. So I used to feel like, man, I'm not one of the guys on the team,
Right.
Yeah, sure. I show up and I put in the work and I'm consistent. And obviously they bought off on me. They gave me a checkmat black belt. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I'm like, there's levels to this. And I'm not on the level that most of my teammates are on. And that used to kind of bother me. But it's not until, I'm 41 now, and I've started to realize like my role as a gym owner and a professor and a coach and a mentor is very different than an athlete. And it's like those guys may be able to slap and bump and tap me out, but that's not my job anymore to be the best fighter I can be. Sure, I still like to train, and we're all on the lifelong journey of getting better. That's not going to change. But at the same time, what I get fulfillment out of now is bringing in a young kid from that doesn't have a male role model, or someone overcoming an injury, and then watching them grow through jiu-jitsu. That's what it's all about for me now, man.
Yeah. I always say, like, we talk about this a lot. Like, I think one of the biggest keys that I've taken away, I started wrestling when I was a kid, but from wrestling and, jujitsu is like, even when you're losing, you're not losing, right? Because you're always getting back. You're always fighting back. Like it's okay, because that's how the world works. It's going to slap you around. You can't necessarily give in just because it slapped you around a few times.
100%, man. I tell my students all the time, most of the lessons that you're going to take away from my mat room have little to nothing to do with fighting. Like, don't get me wrong, you'll become very proficient at fighting and self-defense if you buy off on jiu-jitsu and you put the time in. But where it's going to benefit you more is building your resiliency, learning how to adapt and overcome, face adversity. And I tell my students all the time, jiu-jitsu is going to improve your professional life. It's going to improve your ability to parent. It's going to improve your relationship with your significant other. And when people just listen to us talk about these things, it sounds like, man, you guys are on that fucking jiu-jitsu cult. But once somebody gives it that night, I always tell new people, I said, give jiu-jitsu 90 days. And I have yet to meet the person that gave jiu-jitsu their time and then regretted it. Like, have you guys ever heard that? Like, hey, you know what? I trained for 6 months. That was a big waste of time. I should have done something else. You don't hear that about jiu-jitsu ever.
No.
Yeah,
it's usually the exact opposite. Once I've trained jiu-jitsu and I'm not training in jiu-jitsu, I don't feel normal. Like I start feeling abnormal when you're not training.
And did you notice when you did make that decision, and then it came down after you put the video, and then they asked you to remove it, and then you didn't, and you knew what was coming. Did you notice any changes within just your immediate jiu-jitsu community? Opinions, disagree, agree kind of thing?
Well, no, it was, I'm not trying to build a team of like-minded people because I don't want to be surrounded by a bunch of Greg Andersons, but just the climate of the world right now, the way that it played out is we have built a team of people that are very pro-freedom, pro-liberty, and they want to have the ability to choose what works for them. So at my academy, I was like every other academy. We shut down initially because we thought the Black Plague was coming, right? Then I got fired, and then I started to see the same things that everybody saw. Like Washington State released a essential versus non-essential list, and my gym wasn't on the essential list, but anything that padded the pocket of the government was somehow deemed essential. And so you could go stand in line to buy marijuana, but you couldn't come and train jiu-jitsu or CrossFit at my academy. And it's like, listen, I'm a libertarian and I like smoking marijuana. I'm not saying that pejoratively, but what I'm saying is, when you look at what the government said they're going to allow people to do and not to do, it made no fucking sense.
Yeah.
And so I said, hey, we are open for business. Okay. We closed down for the 2 months or whatever it was. And we're ignoring all mandates. There, my gym to this day is a mask-free facility. And in Washington State, you have to, if you don't have your mask on, you can't be open. Like, there's a lot of threats that have been slung against us from the beginning, but Washington State never took any action. And I've been very open about it. You want to come and shut me down? I fucking dare you. You know what I mean? Like, I have made, and this sounds dramatic to people, but I was already fired as a police officer. That's how I provided for my family, right? Now I've built another thing that has become what supplies my family their ability to sustain life. And if any man thinks he's going to take it from me, then we'll fight to the fucking death, dude. Like I said, man, like that was my entire, I did a decade of combat. You think I'm going to let you take away what feeds my kids? And so I was very open about it. I'm like, guys, my body armor and my AR-15 is upstairs on my mat room. Fucking come and shut me down. See what happens, dude. Like, I'm ready to fucking die over this. And dude, it was getting crazy, man, because like labor and industry was sending us emails and calling us saying, it's been reported you're open still. We demand you shut down. And I'm just like, click. I'm not even going to have a conversation with those people. Mm-hmm. They can fuck themselves, you know? But it got to the point where I remember like hugging my wife goodbye. I started feeling like I was going on a deployment. You know, like my gym's 7 minutes up the street, but it's like, is this the last time I'm going to see my family? Because the government is going to try and come after me. And dude, because I showed courage and because I didn't adhere to the mandates, dude, we grew and we grew and we grew. There's so many people that would call and be like, is it true that you guys are not wearing masks in your training? I'm like, yep, absolutely. Can we come and try jiu-jitsu? And what it did is it brought a lot of people from different backgrounds that may have not tried jiu-jitsu under a different circumstance. But since we were the only show in town that was open, especially kids, because man, they weren't in school, all their sports were shut down, and parents were like, our kids need an outlet. And yeah, it turned into the biggest blessing in disguise. And then people signed up and people bought off on what we're selling. And now like all of those people are still, I mean, we haven't lost hardly any members that we gained during that big surge. So it's been a crazy journey, man, but it's weird how everything has been working out.
That's crazy, man. But I mean, I think you started that, you know, just in the immediate, space of that jiu-jitsu, military kind of thing, of somebody that stood up and literally makes a video in uniform in their vehicle about how they feel. And I think everybody was like, yeah, you know what? Fuck that. We got to speak on what we feel. And that's how, things are going to get corrected. So I'll just really, applaud you for that, man. And I wanted to also ask you, even pre-COVID, just talking about your combat experience and how your jiu-jitsu intertwined with that. How did that affect you? How do you think it should affect military and police officers? Should that training be mandatory? All those things.
Well, the first thing that I should say is that if your profession involves you carrying a gun and doing harm to other human beings, and you don't think that you need jiu-jitsu, you're telling yourself a lie. And less so in the military, but police officers, we put our hands on other human beings daily. And sometimes those human beings don't want to follow your instruction. So it's not a matter of if you're going to get into a physical altercation. As a police officer, that 100% happens. And depending on your jurisdiction, sometimes on a pretty regular basis. And so what jiu-jitsu did for me as a warrior was it put my mind at ease, because I'm on patrol. And as you guys are well aware, Seattle has become one of the biggest shitholes in the country. We're overrun by like petty theft and small scale crime and drug addicts and addiction problems. And you're having to interact with these people all day, every day as a patrol level officer. And they're violent and they don't adhere to commands. And it's a problem, right? And I remember thinking, I'm not the toughest guy in the world. I know that. There's plenty of people that mop the mat with me still. But the chance of a drug addicted fucking criminal in Seattle having any success against me in a physical altercation is pretty much fucking zero. And as you guys know, once you've been doing jiu-jitsu for 20 years, another man puts his hands on you, it feels like a baby, And that used to give me confidence. Like no matter what call I was responding to, in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, whatever level of force needs to be implemented, I'm comfortable doing that. And that's through years of training, both with firearms and with self-defense through jiu-jitsu and MMA. And I remember thinking one day, how can the people that are completely untrained respond to calls for service? Like that would be fucking scary. Like, hey, I'm going to go to an altercation with somebody that's being violent and I know nothing about violence. And bro, and cops do it nationwide every single day. And I mean, we all see those videos where it's like 5 cops on top of a guy for 15 minutes. And it's like, dude, if you guys knew the Kimura, he'd be in fucking handcuffs,
Right. Yeah. Simple stuff. Just control,
Yeah. I don't know. I always had, I took a lot of the police tests and things like that. And I just kind of, I didn't serve and, I'm not on law enforcement, but even just taking and filling out the forms. And I'm like, man, there should be like a plus whatever amount of points for, a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I mean, I think they should be, like I always felt like I just got the short end of the stick with that. And, but yeah, I just, everybody that either trains at my academy that's on the job or, we're part of Adopt a Cop. And just, I mean, you see more and more people that are on the job that come in and after they train, even for a few months, they can't see themselves on the job without training jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. And like Mitch, who's the founder of Adopt a Cop, is a good friend of mine. And my gym is also an affiliate with that program. And one thing that he says to the officers whenever we're like doing, like we did an Adopt a Cop fundraiser a couple months ago down in New Orleans. And he's like, one question for you guys. Is there anyone that's been in the program for over 3 months that doesn't think they're capable of beating the version of themselves that walked through that door 90 days ago? And everybody's like, oh, I'd mop the floor with that guy. 90 days of training versus nothing. You're a completely different human being. And so all those cops feel like they see it firsthand who they've become inside of just a short amount of time. And that's what makes them buy off on it. And, if a cop is motivated enough to try that program and start committing to training, they're going to see that and they're going to feel that. But the big challenge is getting people to come through the door, because even though jiu-jitsu is pretty, I mean, I like to say it's mainstream now, but that's because we're jiu-jitsu people. Our circles are jiu-jitsu people.
Right.
And yeah, we got like Jocko and Rogan and some big figures talking about jiu-jitsu. But at the end of the day, my department had 125 patrol officers and probably 5 or 6 of us trained. So it's still just a little niche in the law enforcement community, And dude, it's like, it's funny because out of all of the cops that trained, there was me, another guy, or 2 other police officers that were black belts, and then another guy that was a brown belt and a purple belt, and then like 1 or 2 blue belts. And what you find is the guys that are already good are the ones that are always there trying to get better. And everybody else is just taking their coffee breaks and squandering opportunities. Because we used to say, guys, come to the mat room with us at this time on this day. And it was always just the guys that already trained,
Right. Yeah. It's the guys that are.
You see people that are motivated to come down have had a serious incident, or they were attacked and couldn't do shit about it, and they were lucky enough to survive it. But you need people to. I mean, it's tough. That how can you have your everyday Leo on the job that doesn't train and has never trained realize how much they need it.
Yeah, and so like any cops, and I mean, again, here we are, jiu-jitsu guys talking about jiu-jitsu on a jiu-jitsu podcast. So people that are listening to this, the majority of them have probably already bought off on what it is, right?
Right.
But one thing that I do when I do get people or police officers that are willing to give that initial try and like, hey, can I come up and train for a week and see what I think of it? I'll have some of my females just kick the shit out of them. And I'll pull them aside afterwards. And I'm like, listen, I'm not trying to humiliate you or make you feel like a weakling. The reason that I just had that purple belt feel like a fucking whirlwind on top of you and there's nothing you could do is I'm showing you the power of jiu-jitsu. Because if that girl that you have 100 pounds on can fucking sweep you to knee on belly and pin you to the ground, like that lets you know how powerful this art really is. And and it's funny because I have some people, everybody has their story of why they started jiu-jitsu. And one of my coaches went with a guy at my academy who was, he's literally a grandpa. He's in his like late 50s. And he was one of my blue belts. And a dude walked through the door and was like, who's this old man? And and he goes, hey, do you want to get a roll in? And he's like, man, I wanted to roll with him, but I was afraid I'd break his hip, And then my blue belt just tore him up. And he was like, wait a minute, this old, frail looking man just strangled me and there's nothing that I could do about it. And so I always tell people, when you have that come to Jesus moment, you're going to go one of two ways. You're going to run from it and pretend it didn't happen, or you're going to embrace it and say, man, those deficiencies just had a spotlight shined on it, and I'm going to have to correct those. And I'm sure you guys have your, oh shit, that's what jiu-jitsu is moments as well, and it changed your life at that moment.
What do you think? What do you think makes some people go, right? Okay, I'm going to embrace this, and some people go, oh crap, it's not. That's whatever. I got my ass whipped by a 60-year-old dude, and now I don't want to be back here anymore.
Ego
right?
and insecurity.
You think it's ego and insecurity?
It's ego because. And ego is a dichotomy like everything. Cause a lot of gyms will say, hey, check your ego at the door. And I tell my students, I say, hey, you're going to slap and bump with another 205-pound man that's going to try and rip your head off. We are in an ego driven activity. If you don't, because I think ego is is part of what drives you to want to win. And if you're sparring every night, you shouldn't be doing that if you don't have the drive to win. Right. Yeah. But at the same time, if you allow your ego to have too much power and you allow those losses to actually impact you in a negative way, that's applying too much ego to it. And we're all guilty of that, right? Like, how when you get caught by someone that shouldn't catch you, I'm now just getting to the point after 18 to 20 years of jiu-jitsu where it doesn't bother me. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, one of your blue belts, you're kind of just flowing with him or whatever, and he slips past your guard and gets on an arm, and it's like, fuck, dude. So there's always a part of us that doesn't like to lose, obviously. But at the same time, the only healthy way to look at that loss is say, what did I do wrong, and how can I get better? And I think that some people are wired, or they make the choice to take those uncomfortable moments via either in training or, like you said, those cops that have those uncomfortable moments out on the street, and they use that to motivate themselves to become better. Whereas some people, they just want to put that on the back burner and say, hey, that was an outlier. That's probably not going to happen again. I'm good, And the truth is, you're not good. You're never good, Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about like, people that realize and don't realize that they need jiu-jitsu. Where I have my academy in the Hamptons, we're right next to a Air Force base. And a lot of the people that train at my place, a couple of them are pretty high level, like pararescue guys. And so I put a lot of time in training those guys on the base. And it was pretty amazing because, of course, I've heard of the PJs. I always loved anything military and all those units. And I don't know if they're tier 1 units, but they're definitely U.S. Air Force Special Ops. And, but I didn't know, and it was unbelievable to me that the reason why the pararescue guys have to contract out or, for martial arts training and why they came to us was because they're one of the only tier 1 units that can operate on U.S. soil, to do things like hurricane rescues and, ocean rescues and things like that. And when they can't be armed. So,
okay. Yeah, there you go.
Like, think about when they're doing Katrina, the looters that are coming after them, and they don't even have a pistol on them. That blew my mind. That blew my mind.
That's crazy.
And that's one of the reasons, I went onto the base and those guys, they got their own mats, and the whole, pretty much the whole unit is into it. A lot of their kids train at my place, and just really happy to be able to go on that base a lot and train those guys. To see people that in their eyes, they know they need it, is totally different than just training, regular people at an academy,
Yeah, no, absolutely, man.
So that just blew my mind. Like, there are some people that need it, and then there's some people that really need this thing,
Right.
And then the thing is that a lot of people don't put a lot of weight in. Is like, yes, you have your first responders or your military. It's probably more likely than not they're going to get in some type of physical altercation. But then you just have your day-to-day people. Like up here, we have Amazon and Boeing and soccer moms and stuff. But just because your profession isn't necessarily putting you in harm's way, dude, human beings just by nature, like we're a violent race of, you know what I mean? Like the human race, you pick up any book, all we do is hurt each other. And that's all we've been doing since the beginning of time. And so I think, especially as a man, if you have a family, like we are obligated as protectors to know and understand how to control situations. And if you have people that are depending on you for their physical safety, man, you don't have to buy off on jiu-jitsu and become a black belt someday and love it like we do. But I tell people that too. Even if you hate jiu-jitsu, I think you owe yourself a year of it just to develop capabilities as a protector and as a man and a head of household, Right. And it's bizarre to me. Like I've used jiu-jitsu in the civil. I had a guy trying to break into my house when I was a blue belt and strangled him unconscious with an arm drag to rear naked choke. And that was the first time that I used jiu-jitsu in a real world application. And it was just boom, quick arm drag. It spun him right into the choke. And he was asleep in like 4 seconds. And I was like, whoa, like it even surprised me how effective it is. Right. And so, I was sleeping. It was 3 a.m. and 25 seconds later, I'm doing jiu-jitsu with a guy. You never know what life's going to throw at you. And so like to be completely unprepared, to me, it kind of goes back to what I was saying. Like I don't think I could be able to just relax in who I am as a man, knowing that at any given time, if I was called upon to help another person or a member of my family, and I wasn't capable of doing that, that'd be a hard headspace to live inside of.
Right. And what's crazy too is, you went right into it, right? That arm drag to taking his back, right? But that's what the training is. Like you do this. How many times have you done that? And, and that's what makes it just makes it instinctive. You don't have to think about it. You just go straight to it.
100%, man. And that's what, in my opinion, we have the martial arts, in my opinion, like Western boxing, kickboxing, judo, wrestling, jiu-jitsu. To me, those are the top 5. And why is that? Because when you spar, you are actually sparring.
Yeah, it's live.
And it has to be live. For martial arts to work, you have to spar at a live speed. That's what helps you develop your timing and your rhythm, your ability to read another human being and apply like balance and base and agility. And if you aren't sparring at a live speed, your art will never develop into something that is applicable to real life. And so that's what I get people all the time that are like, hey, will you do a Saturday self-defense, women's self-defense seminar? And I'm like, I can't do that because in my opinion, I'm selling snake oil. I was like, I have done a few times and I don't call them self-defense seminars. I call them an introduction to grappling because I can introduce you to something, but do not leave my mat room thinking you have any type of proficiency. And if some guy breaks into your house at 3 a.m. when you have 2 hours of training on a Saturday morning, and that was 6 months ago, it's not applicable and it's not going to work. And so I always tell people, if you want, and I run a course called Guns and Gis, which is a weekend introduction to jiu-jitsu and combat pistol fundamentals. And I tell my students the same thing. I can show you the foundation. I can show you the principles of what jiu-jitsu and what shooting entails. But if you don't go home and continue on this path, it's a waste of your fucking time, and you're never going to be good at it. You know, nobody ever got good at anything in 3 days. And so to say that we're gonna be the first program that offers that, we're full of shit, man. You know.
Yeah, that's spot on. It's like, you know, right out of the Matrix, right? You can show you the door, but you got to be the one to walk through it. You know.
Of course, man.
And that's a huge point. I definitely agree with that.
And it's interesting too, you know, because, you know, we have to look at our, you know, as people, there's stuff can happen at any time, and we don't spend any time making sure we're preparing ourselves in some ways for our own survival. Like, think about this, whether it's your health or whether it's to protect yourself. Like, you know, a lot of people, we do, but a lot of people don't want to spend the time to make sure they're ensuring their own safety or health. It's pretty crazy.
It's bizarre, man. It's like de-evolution that you've seen. Idiocracy, right? It's like everybody is just almost purposely getting fat and weak and depressed. And it's like, dude, all the tools are out there to become strong and intelligent and happy and like actually have some resilience and some resolve. Like, the formula exists. It's not a fucking secret, but it does take work. And that's what separates a lot of people. I mean, how many times have you guys been driving to the academy and it's like, God, I'm so fucking tired. I just wish I should just go home and put a movie on. Just take tonight off, dude. Get back on the grind tomorrow. And you have that internal debate with yourself. And I remember, because from where I worked to where my house was, I'd have to drive by. And this was before this is when I was a student still. I'd have to drive by the academy that I was training with. And on my commute home, I'd have all those reasons come into my head why you should take the night off. Oh, your elbows, your tendonitis is acting up. The baby kept you up last night. You didn't get enough sleep. On and on and on. And then I'd see the exit approaching, and I'm like, all those excuses, you're still a fucking pussy if you don't take the exit, put your gi on, and get on the mats. Yeah. And that would win every single time. But it's a literal internal debate with yourself to stay on the path, you know?
Yeah, and what's funny is, because we all do that, and every time you go, you're like, I'm so happy I went. Right? I'm so happy. I feel so much better like than I did before I got there, no matter how tired you were. And the same thing, I have young kids, no matter how late you were up, you know what I mean? Like, you feel so much better after you go.
Bro, it's funny you say that, because I'm like, literally every single run you go on, as soon as you're done, you feel better. You're like, fuck yeah, dude. I got all that fresh air. My muscles feel strong. I got those endorphins. But before every single run starts, it's the same thing. It's like tying your shoes. God, dude. And I'm like, dude, you've been working out for fucking 25 years. When are you going to enjoy the process of lacing your shoes up and getting outside? But I just think I think human beings, and I'm no exception, we're just an inherently lazy creature, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, like 70% of people are obese now. I mean, of course, we're an inherently lazy creature. The proof is out there, you know? And if
everybody wants to stay inside all day.
If you don't have that voice inside of you that forces you to step outside of that comfort, it's going to get you too, you know? Yeah. I tell people I am an inherently very lazy person, and I hate eating healthy, man. Like, I wish that I could sit on the couch and eat pizza. That's what my mind is telling me to do. Right. But I'll look like Chris Farley in 15 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, it's, you know, people always, I'm sure you guys follow Cam Hanes, right? And it's like his saying, like, people always tell him, must be nice, you know? And it's like, yeah, it is nice, because I get up every single morning and I put the work in, even though I don't want to. And there's there's no free lunch. People didn't just become good athletes through osmosis, but what people don't see is all the work on the back end behind the scenes, you know?
Yeah. And it's almost like that with so many things in life. And maybe to your point, it's inherent in humans. Like, there's so much work you have to put, whatever it is, to be in good shape, to lose weight, to have a successful business, whatever it is, you're always putting that work in to evolve to where you want it to be. And it's almost never ending.
Bro, and the older I get, the more I come to terms with accepting that it is a never ending process. And I mean, that's why I name my podcast The Endless Endeavor, because as soon as you think you've made it, some milestone in life, and it's like either like with your relationship or a monetary amount or your business is at this level, as soon as you think like, yes, I got it, something shifts and you got a new fucking problem to overcome, and you got new things that are fucking like taking your time and your energy, and it feels like you're starting from square one again. And when you finally embrace that, it's like, no, that's the journey of life. If life ever stopped throwing you those problems, it'd probably become pretty fucking boring, right?
Yeah.
And so embrace that and understand that this life is going to just continuously and endlessly sling shit at you. And the whole purpose of us being here doing what we're doing is figuring out how to navigate all this stuff, and then through that process become better human beings, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
What was your like going into your specifically the jiu-jitsu journey? Like, were you always with Checkmat? How'd you start? How'd that journey begin?
So it was 2004, and I was deployed to Ramadi, Iraq, and I was on a small base called Blue Diamond, and it was a Marine Corps controlled base. And we had a couple SEALs that were deployed with us, and I was 215 at the time and a really good athlete. And one of the SEALs was about 170 pounds. But when I say 170, he looked like GSP, like super fucking athlete, right? But still, I mean, I was 40 pounds bigger than him or whatever it was. And he goes, "Hey man, do you want to train tonight? I don't have any training partners." And I was like, "Yeah, what do you do?" He's like, "Muay Thai and Jiu Jitsu." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I've never lost a fight before in my life. Let's train." Well, that's because I'm fighting drunk scrubs at a bar. You know what I mean? I didn't know. And even in the Ranger Regiment, they teach you. And back then, it was kind of newer, and they would show us some arm bars and chokes and stuff. So I thought like, oh, I kind of know some of this stuff, but I'd never sparred with somebody that knew what they were doing. And he was a purple belt, and I was a guy that didn't know what I was doing. And so how that played out. And so that was my what the fuck moment, like I thought that I was this like strong athletic fighter, and this dude treated me like a baby. And we did MMA rounds too. So he'd like fucking leg kick and then double leg takedown and mount me and strangle me. And every aspect of the fight felt like I was in zero control, because I wasn't in any control at any point, And man, I remember thinking like, I can't allow another man to be able to do that to me. So I told him, I said, "Bro, I want to train with you every single night for the rest of this deployment." And he's like, "Cool, man, let's do it." And so for the next 90 days or whatever it was, him and I were in this mat room every single night, and I was just eating it up. I redeployed home and lived outside of Seattle at the time. And I joined a Gracie Baja Jiu-Jitsu team and then an MMA school too. And I focused on both gi jiu-jitsu and full contact fighting. For like the first 4 years I was into jiu-jitsu, and I took some fights as a blue belt and some MMA matches. And I got to a point where I felt proficient as a fighter, but I never loved MMA like I love jiu-jitsu. Like going to MMA and fighters training at night was always like, fuck, man, fuck. Like, cause you're going to glove up and you're going to fight other men. And it's just like, it started to weigh on me. And it got to the point where it's like, okay, you had this goal of becoming a good fighter, and now you're a blue belt in jiu-jitsu and you're a pretty good stand-up fighter. Not fucking great, but I felt like I can hold my own against most people now. And I said, but jiu-jitsu was the side of it that you always really loved. And so I decided right as about I was getting my purple belt that I'm going to move away from the MMA scene and invest 100% of my energy into jiu-jitsu. And at the same time, I moved to Southern California for work. And so this is kind of a funny story, man. This was 2011. And I looked at where my house was to where my office was, and I found a jiu-jitsu academy, and it was called Checkmat Corona, California at the time. And I walk in and the head coach is Buchecha. But this was 2011 and he hadn't won. He didn't win the world title until that following summer, right? Mm-hmm. So he was just this new checkmat beast that, you know, the rumor mill was going wild about, but he hadn't become Buchecha yet. And so it was me, him, and probably, I mean, that academy probably had 20 people, right? So pretty small academy. But then I had that moment again, like the first time I rolled with Buchecha, I thought that I had this jiu-jitsu thing kind of figured out. Dude, I was a white belt again, you know, and I was like, you know, I had fast tracked. By this time, I was a brown belt, and I got my brown belt in 5 years through Gracie Baja up here north of Seattle. And I think I got my brown belt fast just because I was strong and I was a good athlete and I could beat a lot of guys. But that doesn't, you know how that goes. That doesn't mean that you have high level jiu-jitsu. That just means this guy's attributes outperformed that guy's attributes. And so when I joined Checkmat as a brown belt, I realized a lot of those blue and purple belts down in Southern California competition circuit were fucking eating me alive. Right. And I remember I walked into Buchecha's little office there and I said, hey man, I want you to make me a white belt again. And I want to relive this whole journey through your team and under you guys' belt progression. And he looked at me and goes, Greg, you earned brown belt. No one can fucking take your brown belt. Go train as hard as you can and just enjoy the journey. And so, I was a brown belt with Checkmat for 5 years before I got my black belt with him. Wow. And that's the best thing that ever happened, man. A long pause in promotion to just focus on you with no stress of when's the next belt coming, you know?
Yeah. That's crazy. And then, so when you got your black belt in what year? What year did you become black?
2015, very beginning of 2015. Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, I just hit 7 years, I believe.
Wow. Okay. So you've been a black belt.
And it's funny, dude, because like you think, I mean, I've relived this enough times to now know that your jiu-jitsu journey is endless. But if I look at who I was the day I got my black belt versus today, I feel like I didn't know fucking anything about jiu-jitsu, you know? It's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
Coaching really helps you grow as well. You know, that's been a huge blessing for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I keep thinking like, you know, it's like, you see, people starting their journey, whether they're older or younger, and you're like, oh my God, remember when I was a white belt or a blue belt? And you're like, holy smokes, like, was it that bad? Like, when you're training, you're like, oh, they need some mentoring.
It was that bad. It was that bad. Yeah, I tell people all the time, I wouldn't trade my jiu-jitsu knowledge for $10 million. I wouldn't. If you said I had to walk into the academy tomorrow as a day one white belt and you'd cut me a check for 10 million for my mental well-being and like what I've earned through blood, sweat, and tears on the mat, you can't put a monetary amount on that, you know?
No, it's crazy. I mean, how many hours you've dedicated to it, not just like your time on the mat, but just like jiu-jitsu in general, and it's crazy how much time we dedicate to these arts. It's huge.
No, I mean, there's like, it's funny. There's a meme or something that's like, in the amount of time it takes to become a black belt, you could become a brain surgeon or something.
Yeah. We actually did it. We actually did the math one day. Like me and this guy, Dave Fernandez, and it was like crazy. You could have gotten like your bachelor's, your master's, your doctorate, you become the brain surgeon, and got like 2 other degrees, in the same time, up to like black belt with the amount of mat time. And I was just including mats and like mat time and like some tournaments, you know what I mean? It wasn't even including like all the research we do and all the studying we do. It was like crazy. It was like multiple degrees. We were like, that's pretty insane. Yeah.
I mean, and so tell us about Electric North. So like you're on the job and you got your black belt and you're gonna open your academy. That was pretty much.
Yeah. So I got my black belt through Joe Alassies. And so if anyone's not familiar with him, he's an 80cc champ. He's a world champ. And he's just another one of those high level checkmat monsters. And his academy is Electric Jiu Jitsu out of Huntington Beach, California. And so not only did I get my black belt under Joe Al, but him and I became like best friends. And to this day, he's one of my closest friends on planet Earth. And so I knew that shortly after he promoted me, that I was planning on moving back home north to the Seattle area. And he knew that too. And that's why he kind of surprised me right before I moved with a black belt, because I had no expectations. You know, I was a lifelong brown belt at that time. It had been 5 years and I was like, well, this is, you know what I mean? This is my life, brown belt. That's all good though. And so as soon as he promoted me to black belt, I was thinking, man, I should open and because I'm moving right away, I should open another Electric Jiu Jitsu and be under him. And so my academy is Electric Jiu Jitsu, but we're Electric North, and then he's Electric Jiu Jitsu down in Huntington. And that was the plan, man. Open that up and see where Jiu Jitsu took me. But like I said, it was such a slow process that I ended up going back into law enforcement because I had 3 small kids. Right. And because of that, now it's like, well, I opened this new academy, but it's not making enough money to even sustain life. So I'm going to become a police officer again. And then I'm going to still teach at the academy 2 nights a week because that's what my schedule allowed. And what I found is, man, that you set the tone at the academy, and it's up to you as the leader to really set the tone and the energy and the vibes. And people are gonna either buy off on your academy or not based on the energy they feel when they walk through the door. And what I found is I just wasn't present enough to be able to create the academy that I had envisioned. And I mean, think about that. What academy can do well with you there 2 days a week, right? And I had very proficient instructors and great people running the classes, but at the end of the day, they're going to treat it like you're going to treat your own baby, you know? Mm-hmm. And so again, once the video came out and I shared my priorities, I looked at what I needed to do to be able to finally give this academy the attention and nurture it the way that it needed. And now I'm there every night and I'm running classes daily and I'm the face of the academy again. And I still have those other assistant coaches covering, you know, some kids class stuff or maybe some morning stuff, but there's just a lot more continuity with the gym. And because of that, a lot of people, they come upstairs now and they feel the energy. And I'll tell you, and I'll be interesting to hear if you guys came to the same conclusion. Coming from an MMA background and then also like the checkmat competition team where it's just monsters, every time you roll is to the death. I inevitably brought that energy to my own academy for a while. But what I found over a couple of years of honing some extremely tough competitors and extremely tough athletes, it's like we have a room full of guys that I'd put up against anyone, but it's 12 guys. 12 guys don't cover your mortgage, but also 12 guys isn't creating an environment where jiu-jitsu's for everybody. And so me and Joao talked about this a lot because Joao was the highest level of competitor. His gym was about a training environment so he could go win the next 80cc. And he realized it's not a viable business model. And not only is it not a viable business model, but you're excluding a lot of people from jiu-jitsu. Because if you get a soccer mom who's a little overweight and heard about jiu-jitsu on the Joe Rogan Experience and says, you know what, I want to give that a try. And she walks in and it's a bunch of dudes at 7% body fat doing 10-minute rounds. Right. They're going to turn around and walk out the door and not come back.
They're going to turn around just from the smell of the place, probably, you know?
Yeah. I even had some people say, like, I don't have a six-pack. I'm probably not a good fit for this gym. And it's like, fuck, man. Like, yeah, that's kind of funny. But at the same time, I don't want people to feel like jiu-jitsu's not for them. Now, we don't want to water jiu-jitsu down like they've done with karate and taekwondo and start selling an inferior product. But at the same time, we need as coaches to have that belief that jiu-jitsu is for everybody. And if you're overweight, or you've never been an athlete, or you are someone with some type of ailment that precludes you from being like super high level, we need to be able to make the gym work for those people and offer them something, as well as still building up your young killers that want to be high level competitors, you know? And I've finally figured out a way to offer that same training under one roof. And it's cool, man, because it's like, we close down training at 7:30 p.m. Our last class of the day goes from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. I'm never locking the doors before 8:30 because we have 30 people that want to sit on the mats and talk about their day, or ask questions about technique, or vent about, you know, what their wife did. And it's like, I'm sitting back and I'm observing. This is what the mats are about. It's about these people having a community, having a place to unplug from their day-to-day grind, that's away from their significant other, that's away from their employer, that's away from all the stresses that they have to face day to day. And now they get to plug in with a different group of people. And that's what's become the most powerful thing, man. It's really cool to see that, like, we have finally created an environment that still offers good training, but people from all different walks of life are feeling welcomed.
Yeah. I mean, Brian, I'm not going to allow myself to go down a rabbit hole here, my friend. You take that.
Great. Greg talks about this all the time because we both grew up in a very fight to the death sort of jiu-jitsu.
I mean, I say it all the time. There's no secrets in jiu-jitsu. Everything is on YouTube. There's no seeking out a famous Brazilian to learn all these things. The secret is in how you build the community at your academy and allow it to be an environment where you can have a guy that wants to compete at the Worlds, and you can have that mom that wants to come in just to break a sweat. You got to have that environment that allows that. So,
Yeah. No, and once you feel like you've started to find the formula that works for that exact environment, bro, I'm telling you, at least at my academy, that's when it's like, boom, we started growing exponentially, because you got both fighters talking about your gym, and then you got both soccer moms talking about your gym. And it's just, growth starts to become exponential. It's really cool to see.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing that's kind of funny. One person came in and left a review on, I don't remember if it's Google or Yelp, but they're like, this guy is not enforcing the mask mandate. Everybody's up there. There's no social distancing. And just kind of went on like a Karen rant. And then that ended up getting us tons of customers. People are like, I read that review and I wanted to come check out your gym the next day.
Right. I wanted to train there. Yeah. I think something you pointed out, especially, being on the mat, right? You're talking to people like there's a ton of diversity on the mat. But here's the thing. It's a place where everyone has so much respect for everyone else 100%. Because you fought it out, like literally, like you've been as intimate with that person in that fight or that role, like just minutes before, and everyone just has like this major amount of respect for everyone else on that mat, regardless of anything else, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about jiu-jitsu.
100%, man. And that's like, I tell people all the time, because all the different things that is just plaguing our society. It's like, oh, black versus whites and transgenders and the Democrats are saying this to the Republicans. It's like, dude, come on the mats, and nobody gives a shit about your sexual orientation, the color of your skin, what politics you buy off on. Like, it's my jiu-jitsu versus your jiu-jitsu. Let's see how it plays out. And because that's such a fulfilling experience, people don't care, put emphasis on all the other bullshit. And it's like, where else in society can you have an activity that brings together so many different walks of life? And that's one reason why jiu-jitsu right now, more than ever, I think, is super powerful, because the powers that be in the media and all the corruption in our government, every single thing we look at is divisive, and it's pulling us apart, and it's destroying relationships. And jiu-jitsu is the antidote to that, man. Like, jiu-jitsu is the complete opposite. And I'm sure you guys have felt this too. Like I travel anywhere that I go in the world. Like I went to Reykjavik, Iceland on a vacation, and I walked into Gunnar Nelson's gym, and I was like, "Hey, I just want to get some rolls with you guys tonight at your 5 p.m. class or whatever." And he's like, "Where are you from? What belt are you?" And he's like, "Oh, dude, you're a black belt? Well, fuck, come have lunch with the team before practice." And like, you just instantly have a room full of friends with people that have never fucking met you before. They know nothing about you, but we're on the same path, and that's enough. You know, it's cool to see, and that's why I'm always extremely welcoming of anyone that's coming through Seattle. Dude, if you want to get some rolls in, you want to kick it with a cool team for a day or two, come to my academy. I don't do drop-in fees. Like, I just want, if you're out of town and you want to get some training in, come train with the team, because we want to meet new people and grow that jiu-jitsu network, you know?
Oh man, that's speaking to my heart, right? We won't go down that rabbit hole.
I know. Greg's very similar minded.
It sounds like Greg and Greg are on the same team, huh?
Oh, yeah. That's a whole nother separate podcast. So Electric North is you can find them on Instagram. Your personal page on Instagram, Greg Anderson, right? Or is that it?
It's Granderson33. So GR Anderson 33.
Awesome. And then Endless Endeavors podcast. So that's just what's the main goal of that? What do you got on that podcast? Just get anybody on there specifically, or?
That was a weird journey for me too, because I was never going to do podcasts like that. I never had really an aspiration or thought that that'd be something that I would do. And then I was invited on Cleared Hot with Andy Stump, and we had a really good time. It was just, and we're both from special operations and we're both jiu-jitsu guys. So it's like, we just vibed and had a good show, and it was a lot of fun. But because he has a huge platform, I started getting a lot of emails and DMs. They're like, "You should do your own podcast. You should do your own podcast." And I remember thinking, like, that's kind of weird, you know? And then I got enough people saying that I should try it that I was like, why not? I had fun. It's just like we're doing right now. I don't know you guys, and this has been a fun a fun way to spend an hour of the day, you know? And so I was like, you know what? Let's give this a try. If it has some success, cool. And if it doesn't, I'm sure that I'll get to meet some cool people and hear some cool stories in the meantime.
I'm going to have to go on the Endless Endeavor, I think, and go down some rabbit holes.
Let's do it, man. And so, I didn't want to pigeonhole myself with like military or jiu-jitsu.
That's smart,
or law enforcement. I was like, let's have a podcast that's just kind of open to whatever, you know? And so, I bounce around. Yesterday, I recorded an episode with a couple that opened some very highly successful real estate companies. And then they went bankrupt, and then they built themselves back up. And then they went bankrupt, and then they built themselves back up. And now they're doing better than ever. And just anybody that has a story that's inspirational, I think is cool to get out to the world, because you never know who's out there that hears a story and it resonates with them. And I mean, I'm sure you guys get it too. I get emails regularly that's like, I got one yesterday, and it's like, "Hey man, I just wanted to let you know, I heard you talking about how important trying jiu-jitsu was. So I tried it, and 18 months later, I just got my black belt today. And it's all because you told me to step outside of my comfort zone and try it." And he goes, "And now I have a whole new group of friends, and my life has improved on so many different levels." And it's like, you realize words that you put out to the world have a lot of power to them. Yeah, and as soon as you realize that, dude, any one of us has the power to impact somebody else in a positive manner. And dude, that's what life's about, right? That's what's really going to feel fulfilling at the end of the day. And so that's why the podcast has become a fun journey for me, because I look at it as a tool for me to allow other people to be inspirational. And like, sometimes that I get the benefit of being that person. My words resonate with some people. More often than not, I've just built a platform to allow other people to be that person. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome, Greg. Well, everyone check out Endless Endeavor.
Definitely. Yeah, everybody check that out. Check him out on Instagram. We got Granderson. Give him a follow. And everybody can find your podcast wherever podcasts are, I'm sure. So
yep. Well, cool guys. Appreciate it. If and again, if any of your listeners are ever in the Seattle area, my gym's about 45 minutes north of downtown. Please come out. Let's roll, man. Let's have fun. And if I'm ever out in New York, I'm gonna have to come and
train.
you guys too.
Absolutely.
Good time, man.
Awesome, man. Well, guys, appreciate it. Make sure you guys keep following, like, subscribe, and we'll keep in touch with you guys. This, hopefully, we'll be having, let's see, what do you think, Brian? At least a whole schedule full of season 2 coming, right?
Yeah, we got a lot of people that are booking up. It's going to be a fun season.
Awesome, man. Well, Greg, appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon. Stick around. We're going to chat.
All right. Take care, guys.